What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Dose Media Network YouTube channel. I'm Ben Hauver, and today I am going to be talking about the top 5 tournament plays you can make on DraftKings in Week 4. If you like what you see in today's video, man, drop a like, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. We put out tons of NFL DFS content every single week. We put out gambling content. We talk about the best cash game plays, tournament plays in a video like this, and every Saturday evening, 10 p.m. Eastern, late night live stream where we answer all of your questions regarding DFS for any given week in the NFL. But this is a great week on DraftKings, so let's focus up and get into the top 5 tournament plays on DK in Week 4. Starting off at the running back position, I want to go all the way to the top of the player pool. Jonathan Taylor at 8,800, most expensive running back on the slate. Now, this is one that we have to keep an eye on the injury concerns. He missed practice on Wednesday. It was the first practice that Jonathan Taylor has ever missed as a pro. It's a toe injury, not something that I'm overly concerned about. Tom Pelissero from the NFL reported that he would still play in this game. Now, let's look at Jonathan Taylor for a second. He's been pretty disappointing to start off the year. Obviously popped off in Week 1 with a monster game here, 175 total yards from scrimmage, but combined for less than 20 points on DraftKings over the following 2 weeks. He's averaging nearly 7 points less per game than he did compared to his 2021 average. That's something that we sort of talked about during the offseason, when debating whether Jonathan Taylor was the 101 in fantasy or not, that, he needed to score 20 touchdowns to even be the RB1. So if you bake in a little bit of touchdown regression, which I think could have been expected in this situation, it makes sense that over the course of the year, he's going to be averaging less fantasy points per game, but still in a 1-game sample size, which is what a DFS slate is, the ceiling is still very clearly there. The usage is still absolutely elite, even better than it was last year. In terms of share of the Colts team rush attempts, it's 12% higher for JT than it was last year. He has an 11% target share this season, up from 9.8 last year. Both of these teams, the Colts and the Titans, escaped the cold grips of death last week. But between the two, I personally trust the Colts a little bit more to keep things hot, keep things going in the right direction. So at home against division rival Tennessee Titans, I think that Jonathan Taylor makes a ton of sense, and he's good leverage off of the other high-priced options on the slate. It's going to be hard for a lot of people to play Jonathan Taylor when the chalk at quarterback is going to be all priced above 8K. Steph Diggs is going to be chalky 8.5. A.J. Brown 7.4 as well, I think is going to draw a lot of popularity. So just from a salary perspective, a fact that he's got this Q tag by his name for the first time, I think it's going to drive a lot of people away, and it wouldn't shock me at all to see Jonathan Taylor have a monster pop-off game in this spot and be the highest scoring running back in Week 4. Number 4, let's keep it at the running back position with Naji Harris at 6,700. I think this spot sets up really well for Naji to have the best fantasy game that he's had up to this point in the 2022 season. If you look at his box score, like the workload, still good. Fantasy production has not yet been there, but I think that at home in Zach Wilson's first start of this year, I think that, the Steelers just set up so well. The line right now in Vegas -3. I think that should be higher, favoring the Steelers. We're going to see a positive game script for Naji Harris here against a weaker New York Jets team. I think Zach Wilson is a downgrade off of Joe Flacco, at least in this first game back. Deontay Johnson is going to be one of, if not the highest owned wide receiver on the slate. That's what ownership projections are saying at this point in the week. So I think Naji makes a lot of sense as direct leverage off of Deontay. And then you sort of look at the rest of the running back pool, and there's going to be so much fragile chalk in this range, right? Jamal Williams, to me, 6,100 makes sense for cash, but I personally wouldn't go there at all in tournaments, same way that we didn't go to Fournette or Demont last week in tournaments. Like, sometimes these cash plays make sense for that specific type of contest, but in tournaments, I don't know, you just can't play into Jamal Williams chalk this week at 30%. I think it's just flat out bad. And, I would say the same against, or at least about guys like Khalil Herbert and Dameon Pierce. There's just so much inherent risk with these chalky running backs on bad teams and bad scoring environments. I know the Lions have a good total this week, but I've already bet they're under under 26.5, just with no Swift, no Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then looking at the usage that Jamal got in games without Swift last year, 32% of snaps in one of those games, 42% of snaps in the other. It's just like a bold assumption to think that Jamal Williams is going to come in and one-for-one replicate what Swift did. So, for that reason, I think it makes a lot of sense to just pivot off of those guys entirely and find players in similar price ranges that have the upside to beat them by a little or even beat them by a lot. And Naji seems like one of those guys in a game that I just don't think that the projections or Vegas is valuing how dominant that the Steelers have the opportunity to be. So Naji Harris to me is a clear-cut target this week on DraftKings for tournaments. All right, number 3, we're going to keep it at the RB position, just sort of sticking with that same theory I was discussing with Naji and, looking on ways to stay in the price range that has been winning tournaments, but fading, the thin chalk, the low upside chalk in bad situations, Jamal, Khalil, and Dameon Pierce. For a guy like A.J. Dillon, who, situationally, this is the prime A.J. Dillon spot. Packers have a good implied team total, 25 right now. They're at home against a lifeless New England Patriots offense. No Mac Jones in this spot. It's going to be Brian Hoyer in the year 2022. So to me, what that says is that New England isn't going to be able to generate any offense in this spot, which just sets up for a lot of A.J. Dillon running out the clock as the Packers are up by 2 scores plus in the fourth quarter. And you look at A.J. Dillon, compare him to Aaron Jones, his backfield mate, and the usage, the roles on the team that these two players have are almost identical, if not slightly favoring Dillon, which is crazy to think about. But Dillon, 40 attempts to Aaron Jones, 32, 8 receptions to Aaron Jones, 9. Jones has been slightly more productive, right? 97 more yards from scrimmage, but the opportunities are very, very similar, and you're getting a $1,500 discount to go down to Dillon to get into what has been the optimal DraftKings tournament price range for the running back position in a game that favors Dillon's skill set extremely well. This just makes all the sense in the world. I don't want any exposure to this game outside of Dillon and maybe Aaron Jones to even pay up and be contrarian, but strictly a one-off play. I'm not looking to bring it back, but by any stretch with any New England Patriot. And that sort of goes for all 3 of these players that I've talked about so far. I don't think that you need to bring back Naji, with Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson. That doesn't seem necessary, and I definitely don't want to touch anybody on Tennessee either. So, these are all designated one-offs on a week with a lot of shaky game environments. 6 out of the 12 games on the main slates have totals of 43 and below. So, from these less interesting game environments, you're going to be wanting to one-off these players. I think that at the running back position, that makes a lot of sense this week, and these are my favorite targets at RB for tournaments in week 4. Let's switch things up here and talk some wide receivers. And to me, one of the interesting questions that we're going to be asking ourselves on this week specifically is how much are we going to be valuing opportunity from a target share perspective versus opportunity from a game environment perspective. I think that Gabriel Davis is a player that I'm very interested in this week and sort of favors the game environment aspect of it more so than the target opportunity, because you're going to look at CeeDee Lamb as a player with a top 5 target share in the league. And, he's getting all these targets, no less than 11 in any game this season, 11, 11, 12. But you can see the production has not matched. And that's because Dallas is a bottom 5 team in terms of scoring, on a weekly basis. That makes a lot of sense. They're CeeDee's catching balls from Cooper Rush. And then ownership wise, Drake London is going to be chalky. Deontay Johnson's going to be chalky. Tyler Lockett's going to be chalky. Brandon Cooks is going to be chalky. Like, these dudes are all catching balls from terrible quarterbacks, and none of these games are very impressive to me. Gabe Davis, on the other hand, you're sacrificing a lot. Like, he's not going to be a top tier player from a target perspective, even in games where the Bills throw a ton. Like, they threw 60 plus times last week. He had 6 targets, but even still played over 95% of the snaps. Gabe is a full-time player, deep down the field threat, 6,600. You're like literally paying up to be contrarian and to get exposure to what is clearly the best game on the slate in this Baltimore-Buffalo potential shootout. Diggs is going to be chalky. Gabe Davis makes a ton of sense, I think, as a way to pivot off of Diggs chalk, or even, bring down the cumulative ownership of your Josh Allen to Diggs stacks by making it a double with Gabe Davis. Maybe more of a smaller field tournament sort of play than a large field. That's something I would maybe check in with us on Saturday about. Going to digest how I feel about that a little bit more. But Gabe, to me, clear cut. You want to get exposure, in my opinion, on slates like these to the best games more so than just the raw target share. Like, I just don't think that the ceilings are going to be that different, and you're getting massive ownership leverage to go off of the chalky guys on this slate to get to somebody like Gabe in the mid-range. So I think 6,600 is a good price for a player that we know has a sky-high ceiling, should get a lot of looks deep down the field. Ravens secondary still dealing with injuries. I expect Josh and this Bills offense to bounce back in a major way following last week's disappointment in Miami. All right, and my number one tournament play this week, and in my opinion, the number one bounce back candidate in all of fantasy football up to this point is Cortland Sutton at 6,400. Cortland Sutton now coming off of his second double-digit target game in a row, 11 targets against Houston, 10 targets against San Francisco. He is second in the league right now in terms of air yards behind Chris Olave. And then even further, you can take it another step. If you sort wide receiver this week on fantasy points per game on DraftKings, Cortland Sutton is 11th, but he's the only player in the top 17 who is yet to score a touchdown. He's also 10th in the league in red zone targets through 3 weeks, and the only player in the top 20 who is yet to score a touchdown. So you mix that with the second highest amount of air yards in the league and all of this red zone opportunity and all of the production even without scoring touchdowns. And what that says to me is that the opportunity is building. The results have yet to come for Cortland Sutton, but he is on the precipice of a monster breakout game. You know, some of these struggles obviously come down to Russell Wilson and the quarterback play and how inefficient this team as a whole has been at getting the ball into the end zone. But, you know, deep in my heart, I still trust Russell Wilson to be able to get it done. He's always been an up and down player, right? Like, that's not a new thing. That's not like a Denver thing. He's been up and down. He's been streaky. And Cortland Sutton, I think, is going to be the biggest beneficiary of the upswing on those streaks. And, you know, it's coming sooner rather than later. I want to be in on it before it is too late. Cortland Sutton at 6,400. I mean, ownership projections have him like middling, like maybe around 10-12%. I personally don't believe that. And I think that contextually on this slate, we're going to see more value open up throughout the week. Like, for example, you know, once some of the Lions stuff sorts itself out, once some of the Giants stuff sorts itself out, like, it's going to make some of the guys down in this range, you know, whether it's Josh Reynolds or Khalif Raymond for the Lions available, or Richie James for the Giants, like, somebody is going to become very heavily owned in that mid-range, which I think will, again, free up the salary and allow people to pay up more for the Diggs and Brown, bring their ownership up, and then sort of minimize the ownership on guys like Sutton and Gabe and the other mid-range wide receivers. So Sutton, to me, number one bounce back in fantasy football entering week 4. JT, Naji, Gabe, Dillon, all phenomenal tournament plays. Make sure you're looking long and hard at these guys and deciding if you want to take shots on them. I obviously will be doing so in week 4. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Appreciate everybody watching. If you're still watching, man, drop a like, sub to the channel, and until Saturday evening, late night live stream, 10 p.m. Eastern, that's going to be it, and we'll see you guys then.